I wanted to have sugar all the time.
Mm.
And it was just a withdrawal of sugar because I drank since I was 14, I started to drink. So when I stopped drinking, it was before I was 30, right?
Mm.
So I had drank for so long that my body was just withdrawing. And, I was walking around with Jolly Ranchers for my first year, just like sucking them back. And, I had a friend, I was like telling her, because I had different mixed messages about whether you should have it or not. And a friend of mine said, listen, it's not getting you drunk. You're fine. And it was just a key moment because I'm like, I held on to those Jolly Ranchers and those that helped me to recover, right? And those tools.
Oh my goodness. That's a
Tool.
really good way to think of it. Yeah. Because a lot of people, first of all, they want to skip steps in recovery. They think, okay, I've stopped binging and purging, therefore I should be completely fine. And it's like, no, you kind of have to become the person who maybe wants to binge and purge, but doesn't binge and purge, and they're uncomfortable with it and they have to cope with that and slowly but surely get through it. And your first stage wasn't, I'm not an alcoholic anymore, I'm completely recovered. It was, I'm recovering. And the thing that's my bridge thing that is getting me through it is these Jolly Ranchers.
Welcome to the Binge Breakers podcast. I'm Jacqueline. I am here to teach you how I overcame bulimia and my binge eating disorder and how you can too. Through simple steps of mind management, repairing your relationship with yourself, understanding your habits, and intuitive eating.
Disclaimer. This recording is not intended to be utilized as medical advice or a medical diagnosis. If you think you're in need of medical attention or treatment, please seek it immediately. This recording will also contain sensitive subjects such as binging and purging, weight, and depression. Please listen at your own discretion and do what you think is best for you.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. Today I have a special guest. She was on the podcast a while ago. She's a client of mine, and more importantly, she is also a coach for a life and recovery coach. She has experience with alcohol recovery, and she worked with me on bulimia recovery. But I was literally just telling her how I think she's such a brilliant mind, and that's why I wanted to bring her on the podcast. But please welcome Jasmine Murudumbay. Thank you for being here, Jasmine.
Thank you, Jacqueline. So excited to be here.
Yeah. So for everyone who doesn't know who you are, maybe they haven't listened to the previous podcast with you that was on my podcast, can you just give it a brief overview of who you are, what you do?
Yeah, so my name is Jazz. I'm a life and recovery coach, and I coach clients to stop beating themselves after a drinking binge and to look at their last drinking episode as a tool to their recovery. So together we work on looking at like their belief systems about themselves, about drinking. And then we work together on their triggers, their cravings, what happened leading up to them drinking, and also the afterwards of self-care after they did binge, because we can really beat ourselves up after a binge. And it's like, no, how do we learn from this and move forward from this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so many parallels between bulimia recovery and what we worked on there and what you work on yourself.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So, and that's why I wanted to bring, when you guys listening out there, I wanted to bring Jazz on because not only does she have experience with bulimia, but then also with alcohol, obviously. And I know so many people that struggle with bulimia also struggle with alcohol. Mm-hmm. I myself sometimes find that I over crave alcohol. So it's something that I have to keep tabs on. Otherwise it could turn into like the binging of alcohol or something like that. So I'm excited to talk to you about that. But first, you just went to Ecuador. Please tell us what that journey was like.
Well, my journey started before I went to Ecuador because
yes.
Yeah, I knew I had to prepare myself mentally to go there because of the food that's there. The last time I went to Ecuador, we're always consistently eating. There's, I find if you go to people's homes, they offer you like food, whether it's like a full meal or snacks. So if you're traveling like to other countries, and if you're visiting family, it's like you're always eating, right? Mm-hmm. So I had to prepare myself with just what also I was going to tell people if I did feel like I didn't want to eat, or if I needed to set those boundaries. I prepared myself like how I would do that. And so that preparation came before I went, because I was thinking, like, in my head, I was like, oh my God, there's going to be like empanadas anywhere, everywhere, right? And
It's a classic empanada.
Yeah. So, and as you know, like, part of my journey in recovery with you, working with you, was I couldn't just have that one empanada. And just foreseeing, like, going to Ecuador, I was like, oh my God, how am I going to deal with this? And so, yeah, so I prepared myself to go. And when I was there, I made the decision that I was going to eat until I was full, right? And I did do that while I was in Ecuador. But what started to happen was I wanted to eat more than what I was like full physically. Like, my mind just was like, no, you could have more. And like, the old behaviors started to come back. And the old thinking behaviors is what I mean. And when I was there, I did what we worked on together, was like, I started to journal. And also I started to ask myself, are you really like hungry? Do you really want to eat this? So, and I paused while I was there.
Good for you for actually putting those things into practice. Were they effective?
Yes.
What did you learn from that?
So they were effective, and I had to work on it. Like, in the beginning, like when I started to feel like that, I had to work on it like each meal, right? Because it's what happened when I was there was like, it becomes like this part of this kind of like euphoria feeling, right? It's like, oh, there's food everywhere. Like, you get excited. And that's where in the past I would get caught up in that excitement. Like, I wanted to be part of that excitement. And I really had to self-talk myself into like, just, okay, that excitement is different to how you're going to feel while you're eating, right? And separating the two, because just it's like, it's really tricky sometimes. Our head just says, no, you want to feel good by eating,
right?
Like, this is going to make you feel good.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious, because I know people are listening. I think I know the answer, but I want to hear what you think. Because people would say, well, you're on vacation, you're in Ecuador, it was a really big journey for you. Why not just overindulge, or why not just eat and follow those desires? Because that is fun. Why were you using those tools? Why was it important for you not to do that?
I use those tools because I started to, as we worked together, started to understand taking responsibility for what I was eating, right? And if I was, which I did tell myself, okay, you're going to overindulge. But that's also part of taking responsibility, is making that decision, like, I'm going to overindulge today, which I didn't know that until there was one time when we worked together, we were talking. I always think about this, the grapes.
Yeah.
Where I overindulged on grapes. And we were talking, and you talked to me about taking responsibility for eating the grapes. Where I saw it is, well, grapes are healthy, so it's okay, right? So, and I made that connection at that time, was I can hide taking responsibility if it's not so bad, the food.
Right. Well, it will continue. Were you going to say something?
I know. Go ahead.
Okay. I was just thinking, because for people listening, they'd be like, well, why would you want to take responsibility for that food? What's the big deal? I think what you're getting at is, it's not wrong to overindulge. Like, you can do that, and it's totally fine to enjoy food. But sometimes when you're thinking it's at the mercy of your urges, or it's not it's almost as if, you're using your own self to make those choices instead of your urge brain making those choices. And even if you are overindulging, doing it intentionally makes you feel a whole lot less guilty and more satisfied. And it's honestly more enjoyable when you're like, I'm doing this. This is what we're going to do, versus kind of like backdoor overindulging, where it's like you're pretending like it's not you that's doing that.
Yes. And that's when, like, there was a point in time where I was in Ecuador where I asked myself, like, why can't I overeat, like, or overindulge. It doesn't mean I'm gonna go back in or relapse, right? And it was that point where I did say, okay, you're gonna overindulge and it's gonna be okay, right? And I did overindulge for a few days, and I started to feel like I was gaining weight, right? And then for like with myself, it's like that panic did sink in, like, oh my God, I'm overeating. And this is what happens of why I used to binge and purge, was that panic that I'm going to gain weight. Right. And then I had this moment of clarity where I was journaling, and when I wrote down, because I started to feel like those old, like that when I was a kid, right? And when I was a kid, I was overweight, so I got bullied and teased. So for me, it was like, oh my God, it's going to happen again. People are going to start to bully and tease me, or I'm going to change. I'm going to be different. And I really had to sit with that, because at that point I realized, you know what? I'm not different. If I gain weight during my vacation, it's not going to change who I am as a person.
No.
Which I thought that before we started working together, I thought if I gain weight, it's going to make me look physically different, which means internally I'm going to be different. Yeah. And I was like, no, it doesn't. It'll change me if I like take that thought and go with it. Then it'll change me as a person. And I realized at that point, that's what I've been doing. Every time I gained weight, it was like that self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like, I'm different. People are looking at me and just not taking care of myself. Right. And I said, no, I'm going to make it mean what it means.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm going to overindulge.
Right. Simply overindulging, gaining weight, that sort of stuff. No, that's really important, especially with what you went through. When people have been overweight and then have bad experiences when they're overweight, they think it's directly a correlation of being overweight, and it's not necessarily the case. And then you think as an adult, even though you're able to process things, you're a lot smarter than when you were a child, those things still carry with you, and you think the same thing's going to happen over again. You kind of taking initiative and observing those thoughts that were just kind of like old behaviors, old patterns, and realizing that's not necessarily true. I can think differently. It's brilliant.
Yes. And also, if part of taking that responsibility, what we talked earlier, was the reality is, if I keep overindulging in like empanadas and fried food, I will gain weight.
Yeah.
And that was like it's kind of like a harsh reality. And I thought about you with the grapes, right? Because it's like, I have to take that responsibility myself. I can't live in like that fantasy that, oh, I'm going to stay like the same weight by eating this.
Yeah. You're not necessarily, and for people listening, this is, weight loss is not necessarily, or weight maintenance is not necessarily something you should always be worrying about in recovery. But with food, there is the reality that, yeah, if you overconsume, eventually you will gain weight no matter what you're eating. And that's not necessarily bad or good, just is what it is. And I think understanding that and accepting the reality of the situation instead of denying it is far better for yourself moving forward.
Yes, because denying it and scaring myself led me back into binging and purging, where this was like, no, this is what's going to happen. It's like a fact. And I had to look at it from like a science point of view, like the calorie intake and what our body, like what we can take. And it wasn't a way to scare me or to shame me. It was just that taking accountability.
Yeah, that's key. And then also, once you kind of accept the reality of how it works, then you work towards, let's eat in a way that serves us, which means sometimes overindulging purposefully, and sometimes just eating in a way that's not only going to feel good and be healthy, but something that tastes good. So we're not saying from this, like, never overindulge ever again or overconsume. That's just not realistic, but it is, understanding that you have responsibility for what you eat, and that's a really good thing.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. So it sounds like an enlightening time. I wanted to ask you, kind of as a segue from the topic of Ecuador, but completely unrelated. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience with alcohol? Like, what led you to become alcohol recovery coach?
Okay. Also, I wanted to add to that point, which is also a point to what we were just talking about, which is also part of my recovery for alcohol, is that I had to also tell myself that if, like, part of my recovery is just overindulging and eating like what I wanted and not restrict myself. And if that meant gaining the weight, that's okay too, right? That's part of like self-love, like for myself and taking care of myself in those moments of like where I'm overeating. And there were some moments where I just wanted to just overeat and indulge, but those are the moments where I was taking care of myself as well. And if that meant gaining weight, that's part of my recovery.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I certainly agree. I think with people view gaining weight and any weight fluctuation as a horrible, horrendous thing. And I think that there's definitely a necessity to it, especially when it comes to you learning how to eat again, how to eat without binging or purging, how to eat trusting yourself versus trusting external measures.
Yes. And what I thought about the correlation was when I was first year into my recovery from drinking, I wanted to have sugar all the time. And it was just a withdrawal of sugar because I drank since I was 14, I started to drink. So when I stopped drinking, it was before I was 30, right? So I had drank for so long that my body was just withdrawing. And, I was walking around with Jolly Ranchers for my first year, just like sucking them back. And, I had a friend, I was like telling her, because I had different mixed messages about whether you should have it or not. And a friend of mine said, listen, it's not getting you drunk. You're fine. And it was just a key moment because I'm like, I held on to those Jolly Ranchers and those that helped me to recover, right? And those tools.
Oh my goodness. That's a really good way to think of it. Yeah. Because a lot of people, first of all, they want to skip steps in recovery. They think, okay, I've stopped binging and purging, therefore I should be completely fine. And it's like, no, you kind of have to become the person who maybe wants to binge and purge, but doesn't binge and purge, and they're uncomfortable with it, and they have to cope with that and slowly but surely get through it. And your first stage wasn't, I'm not an alcoholic anymore, I'm completely recovered. It was, I'm recovering, and the thing that's my bridge thing that is getting me through it is these Jolly Ranchers. It wasn't only the Jolly Ranchers, obviously, but they were a tool that you use. And eventually, obviously, you probably don't walk around with Jolly Ranchers all the time anymore, but they helped you at that time.
Yes. Yeah. And they didn't get me drunk. They were something that I needed at that time. And then when it was time to let it go, I let it go.
Yeah. Because a lot of people, they're like, it's commonly with overeating. The next stage in bulimia recovery, usually after you stop binging and purging, is then you are overeating, you're emotional eating a lot. So you aren't quite doing the huge thing, but it is emotional eating. And people get so upset with themselves. They're like, yeah, but this is not good. And it's like, hey, but you're not binging and purging, and you're in the next phase. And eventually you'll let that go too.
Yeah. Yes.
That's a really brilliant. Thank you for saying that. So tell me, like, I know you don't need to give like a full story of, you already kind of expressed, how long you struggled with alcohol, but I guess maybe a good question is, why did you want to recover from alcoholism?
Oh yeah, that's a loaded question. And as you know, recovery, it happens in stages. Same thing with drinking, right? Like it started off, I was 14 and, I was doing what everybody was doing, drinking, partying. There was something about drinking that I just, as soon as I had my first drink, I was like, oh yeah, I love this. It was just something like what food did. it just provided me comfort, safety. I felt great when I was in it.
Mm-hmm.
But over time, it just started to work against me in the sense where I couldn't get enough of it. And when I had it, I was just sick, or it was just toxic into my life. And I didn't see it even then until I had to go through many years of just painful, like drinking binges, just exposing my family to my drinking, just really beating myself up. And it got to a point where it didn't matter how much I drank. If it was like during the week, in the weekends, I just started to feel horrible. So what we say is like, just drinking just doesn't work anymore. And then the way I can put it is like, I had a gray cloud that was following me around when I was 14. When I drank, it disappeared. And over time, towards the end of my drinking, that gray cloud came like a storm, and it just wouldn't go away. It didn't matter how much I drank, how often I drank. I just felt bad every day.
Interesting. Yeah. I've heard a similar thing too. And then I've also heard people say that the drinking got to the point where the drinking used to make them feel good, but then the drinking made them feel just normal instead. And their normal wasn't even that good in the first place.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So then what, because I know you went through a lot of, obviously you said bad experiences with the alcohol recovery, but what were some of your first steps in recovery? Like deleting alcohol from your life, basically.
So one of the first steps that happened with me was the awareness, right? The awareness of, okay, something's not right. Like my life is just falling apart. And sometimes we can see it. And then like for me, I saw it, but I didn't know how to deal with my life. So when drinking becomes your norm, like you said, it becomes so normal, and how you deal with life becomes so normal. It's like you can't really see what's happening, or you don't want to see it because the alcohol is covering it, right? So, but there's moments where there's that awareness like, okay, I'm really hurting myself, or I'm hurting others, right? And if you don't see it, you feel it, right? And for me, what happened was I just really started to see it. It became stronger, where that dark cloud was like, there was lightning coming out of it, right? And I saw it. Yeah. And I saw it at that moment. So I'm going to say awareness. And at that time, I didn't see it, right? When you're in it, you can't see it. You just feel a lot of pain.
Yeah. How do you deal with the pain that you're no longer numbing out from alcohol?
So how do I deal with that?
Yeah. So like you give up alcohol, and I would assume that it's even like there's the withdrawal, but also there's the mess that you were kind of numbing out with alcohol.
Right.
Maybe that wasn't the case. Maybe you weren't numbing anything out with alcohol, but I'm assuming that you were.
Oh yeah. Okay. Sorry, let's start over. So how I dealt with like the like numbing out is like, for me, I had to do it like one day at a time. Like I had people that helped me that were in that same situation. Because before I actually stopped drinking was I would be with other people that didn't understand what I was going through. And so they were there to help me, but they didn't know how to help me because professionally they couldn't help me. Right. So I started to see an addiction counselor that was like a third party that she didn't know me. She had the tools, and we started to work together. So I could see some of the things I wasn't seeing. So, and then she gave me the tools about just talking to other people that understood what you were going through, which community for me is huge. Whether it's like in my recovery with bulimia or other communities, when people get you, it's like this powerful thing. And sometimes people don't even have to say things. It's just, that there's other people that are in that same struggle.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think something, in my community that you're part of, that's one of the powerful aspects is people feel like, oh my God, I'm such a failure. I'm so crazy, whatever. And then you go on there, and even if you don't post anything, reading other people's stuff and seeing that, oh, I'm not alone and they're going through the same things. And even seeing this is how they got out of it, that does wonders for your morale and your recovery.
Yes.
So basically you're saying how you dealt with first, like your first step of getting out of alcohol was finding someone that was a third party that wasn't, they didn't know you, but they had the tools, they were approaching it professionally, and then also finding a community of people going on the same journey as you.
Yes. And also using I don't want to say using, but asking for help. And asking for help doesn't mean sometimes can you help me? Sometimes we get so caught up in how do we ask for help? Sometimes it's just going for a coffee with someone, talking to them, seeing how they're doing, starting that dialogue of even just how in our community, we all someone will post something, right? All that helps, we all help each other that way, is by showing up for each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I like these, going for a coffee with someone in Miami here that I got to know. She reached out because of stuff I was posting on my social media, and she was like, hey, let's grab a coffee. I want to talk. And she just wanted advice on things that were going on in her life, but it was very casual. It was very enlightening for me and for her. And it wasn't this high pressure situation. So sometimes if you think you're going through something, just texting someone and saying, hey, can we talk? Can be, and they don't have to say anything crazy, but just getting it out off your chest and into someone else's ears instead of your own can be helpful.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So if you gave, sorry, I'm asking for so much detail, but if you had to give someone a step-by-step of, how to approach alcohol recovery from a practical standpoint, what would you say?
So the first thing I would say is go easy with yourself. That's the first thing, because when we're drinking, from my experience, the first thing I want to do is beat myself up. That was just constant, is just beat myself up. So if you're going to go in drinking, have some tools where have a journal, right? Have a journal that's going to, where you can write what is causing me to drink? Let's look at what triggered you to drink. What are the cravings? What are you doing when you're drinking? Because sometimes we're drinking automatically. We think we're drinking automatically, right? But there's actually, if we take that time to slow down, it's actually I think about it in TV where you you play it on slow, and you'll see that there is keys to why you're drinking. Right. Yeah. So go in with preparation. If you're let's say someone decides to not drink this weekend, make a decision, you know what, this weekend I'm not going to drink. And I would even say just for today, just for this hour, and just say, okay, just for now, I'm not going to drink. And just pause it. It's very parallel to our bulimia recovery, pause it and just say, I'm not going to drink for right now. And see how long you can do it for.
Well, I like that you first were saying over the weekend, but then even invite you for right now, because I think sometimes it's so easy for us to make decisions in the future. Oh, we'll do it tomorrow, we'll do it then. And of course, you do need to say that sometimes. It's practical. Like I make decisions for me later in the week all the time. But with addictions like that, it's very common for us to say, we'll do it tomorrow. So it can be powerful while you're listening to this podcast. If you're struggling with alcohol, to make the decision for this hour, you're not going to drink, or for today, you're not going to drink, because that invites all of the feelings that you'll have that are opposed to doing what we're asking you to do. And it's like, that's where the work is too. Because when you do that, you have to then feel the feelings of, no, but I want to drink, but I need a drink, but it's going to be painful, but it's going to be hard. And that will, but doing that work and feeling those feelings will help you through to the other side.
Yes. And also ask yourself, while you're in it, like, what else can I do after you've sat with that uncomfortableness? Because I think that I know.
You're fine.
Okay. I know you can delete it.
All the time.
We have to sit with that uncomfortableness to get better. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know at that time, like I didn't know even when we were working together, how key it is to sit with that uncomfortableness, not going into binging, right? With alcohol, with food, because my initial reaction is, I just want to feel better.
Right.
And and I want to feel better right now.
Yeah. It's like this urgency situation, and it clouds your vision and thinks that you have to feel better. That for some, like, there are literally times where even though I knew that wasn't possible logically, it's like I felt like I'm going to die if I don't figure out how I can make this feeling go away. But then if someone, like if a third party were to come in and just like strap you down and be like, you're not going to get to binge, you're not going to get to drink, like, here you go, sit here. And you would first freak out. You're like, no, I can't do it. And then you would start breathing and you'd start calming yourself down, and you would eventually be okay. And then you wouldn't need to binge or have that alcohol. And that's why the pausing, like you said, for alcohol and for binge urges, gives you the space to realize you're not going to die, you're going to be okay, and you just have to be in that discomfort while it passes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. But then we always say, like, you don't have to sit and stare at a wall all day. You can go and do something else as well, even while you're uncomfortable.
And it's amazing how when you do stop, like when you stop for that moment and you do something else, how much time you actually have. Like when I first went into my recovery and I didn't drink, I was like, oh my God, I have a lot more time than I thought.
Yeah.
Right? Because we use so much time into, when am I going to drink, going to buy the drinks, hiding it, having it prepared. Like I would have places where I would hide my beers.
Yeah.
Like strategically, the pantry, like the bathroom, my living room, like everywhere placed so I can just drink and no one knows.
Yeah, that takes a lot of thinking and planning and pre-planning, and then keeping that, not just the pre-planning, but then knowing it and keeping up the lie, or whatever's going on. Like, so I used to be a pretty habitual liar, and something about it was that it just took up so much my brain space to keep up all those like little webs of lies that were going on, and it just was a lot of mental effort. It was exhausting. So yeah, I can imagine after you give up alcohol, it's like, wow, it's a lot easier.
Yes.
Yeah. So I guess we can wrap things up, but I think that's a really good example of, the process that you'd have to go through with alcohol recovery. It only, scratched the surface. But for someone out there struggling with alcohol right now, or maybe they're like you, they're hiding beers around the house, or maybe they aren't hiding beers, but the idea of going without a nightly drink tonight is like something that they feel super resistant to. What would you say to them?
I would say talk to somebody that they trust, because for part of my recovery was to talk to somebody that I trusted and say, you know what, I feel like there's something wrong. Because chances are, if they're feeling it inside and they're like, I'm hiding my beer and something feels wrong, then that's their sign for help within themselves. and like listen to that voice. Listen to the voice that's saying, oh, this could be wrong.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not that it's wrong in a sense where you're bad. Because sometimes I would like say, oh my God, this is so wrong. And then I would beat myself up.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, it's more of approach of like, okay, Jazz, what is going on? Like you're hiding your beers, but you don't want to do it. So even in that thought, there is space for that. Like, okay, I need to talk to somebody about it. Right. And if they don't have somebody like in their family, reach out to a friend. I'm on Instagram as well that people can just reach out. I've had people reach out and just like telling me like their story or just like thanking me for what I posted and just get some information, because even those steps, it breaks the pattern of taking that drink that they're hiding from like the closet or the couch. Is like bringing light to what's going on inside and having someone giving them that perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that also when you're going through that, you think it's hard to visualize how you're even going to get out of it if you are at the point where you feel like you are dependent on alcohol and you are hiding things around the house and whatever. It just seems like, how am I even going to start? But simply reaching out to someone, getting some sort of information, starting somewhere, anywhere will eventually lead you there. I think that I can do this, and other people, they get so caught up in what perfect ways they're going to do things, and there really is no perfect way. You just kind of have to like stumble, and along the way, like the wheels will come back on. You'll kind of start putting things together. So I like that. Also, what you said about how it's not wrong. Like, it's not that hiding beers around the house is really that morally or ethically wrong, but it's wrong because it feels like an issue to you. And if it doesn't feel right, then you deserve to do something more for yourself.
Yes, it's coming from a loving place.
Yeah, exactly.
Because especially when we struggle with any addiction, with eating disorder, there's this thing that happens to us that we feel a lot of shame. And that shame is so thick, and we're just chipping away at it. And if that means loving ourselves, writing sticky notes. I wrote a sticky note here, "You got this," just over my my laptop, just reminding me so I can chip away at it. Because that's what like life in recovery for me is, just chipping away at it. Like you said, it's not perfect. It's sometimes, we can get caught up in like, it has to be a certain way or it has to be perfect, or I have to recover this way because this person's recovering that way. Like all these noises in our head, where part of or most of my journey is learning about myself, falling down, but how do I get back up? Am I going to get up by myself, or am I going to get the help of others to help me up? Right. And just ebbing and flowing in life.
Getting the help of others is undoubtedly something that has changed my life over and over again. And the more I keep trying to do things only on my own, that's when I get stuck. And that's when I don't grow as much. But once I start reaching out to other people again, that's generally when my life moves forward. And then I have to go through the same process again, where I'm like, oh, I'm isolating, trying to do everything on my own again. Let's reach out again. So it's funny that I'm not addicted to anything, but I find that process in my life, in my own business, that sort of stuff. So it's always a relearning process of reaching out to people for help.
Yes.
Okay. Where can people find you?
Okay, so I am on Instagram, and I'm at Life and Recovery Coach. And I also have a Facebook group page, and it's called Life and Recovery. And I post similar things from Instagram to Facebook, and people can comment. I've had people message me, and they can find me there.
Cool. And if people want to work with you, what's the best way to go about that?
They can send me a message there on Instagram or Facebook. Yeah.
And you offer one-on-one coaching right now?
I do one-on-one coaching. Yes. Yeah, and cool. If you're in the Toronto area, I have Coffee with a Coach. So we're meeting one-on-one.
That's exciting.
Yes,
I always meet with my clients virtually. I've had the opportunity to meet a few of them in person when they're in Miami, but otherwise it's all virtual. But it's always fun when you get to meet with people in person.
Yes, yeah, very excited about it. It's something new that I'm doing. Yeah.
Cool. All right, well, thank you so much for being on the show, Jasmine, or Jess. You do prefer Jazz or Jasmine?
I honestly, like, I used to love Jazz, but I love the way people say Jasmine now.
Okay, awesome. Because I introduced you as Jasmine, but then you said I'm Jazz, and I was like, oh, have I been calling her the wrong name all this time?
I'm okay with both.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you for being here, Jasmine. I really appreciate all your wisdom on this podcast, as always.
Oh, thank you for having me. And I just want to thank you for, always being that coach. You're still in my head and just helping me with all the tools that you have given me.
Oh, thank you. All right. Well, and everyone listening, thank you for being there too. We'll let you guys go here. Bye.